What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the show. We are your hosts, Chase and Myles, and we are at the Lucky Duck. Myles, please tell everybody who do we have on today?
Guys, today we have a great show for you. We're going to be talking about how the scientists put the nanochips into the COVID-19 vaccine and how you can keep yourself safe. For the record, totally kidding. Chase, to be honest, I don't know that much about our guest today, but I'm hoping we'll learn a lot more today. If I recall, we met a few years back at our good friend Michael Butler's wedding.
That's true.
Probably that was the first time.
I think so.
But since then, we both got married.
We did.
And we both moved to Denver.
We did.
And now we live near Chase.
We do.
So with that, give it up for Meghan.
Welcome.
Thank you.
To the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so honored to be starting your second season.
Yes, welcome to episode 1, season 2. Very excited to kick off with Meghan. Thanks for being on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited.
So we've got an interesting drink here. It is a perfect martini is what we're calling it. And there's a secret ingredient in there. We won't tell anybody. They'll have to find out when we release our bar recipe book. Oh, dun, dun, dun.
Oh, I didn't know that was a thing.
Later this year. Yeah. Well, probably 2022. Yeah. So basically what we want to do is all of the drinks that we have on with our guests, we just, we kind of put those recipes in a book. We talk about the spin that we put on it and who the guest was, you know.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
We had a lot of dope drinks on this show.
I know. I'm excited now.
Dope.
What's your favorite one?
This one.
Definitely this one.
I haven't even tried it
I know.
yet.
Oh, shit.
That's
how
big,
confident.
I
Here we
know.
go. Cheers, everybody. Clink, clink.
Yeah. Ooh.
This is freaking good.
That's really good. And I'm really not a martini person necessarily, so
I'm not either.
Pleasantly surprised.
It's mostly alcohol. Like
really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Almost all of it except the orange peel.
It's actually different than anything I've tasted before.
Like what, martini wise?
Yeah. So I guess if you really want to know how it tastes, buy the book.
Yeah. Oh man, Myles, did we start a Patreon as well?
Yeah, we started Patreon. We started OnlyFans.
Oh.
OnlyFans. Oh yeah.
Toes only, right?
Yeah, toes.
Yeah, toes and backs.
Backs.
Yeah, actually the first picture we're posting on there is going to be a topless one of Chase and me.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty explicit.
Yeah.
We won't blur it out, we swear.
That's not giving
Swear
your fans a lot to look forward to if you're starting on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just straight up.
Well, it's going to be topless, but I didn't say from the front.
Oh.
That's fair. That's fair.
Spin.
Yeah.
Gotta pay subscription.
So we tease them pretty hard and then pull it back a little bit.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah.
Smart business tactic.
It's the business model that we're running.
Yeah, but check it out. We also have, we're posting on pretty much every social media channel.
Yeah.
Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram.
TikTok's my favorite social media app now.
It's the best.
It is.
Did you like recently discover it, or you've been a TikToker from the beginning?
I would say somewhere in the middle, probably. Definitely a pandemic TikToker.
Ooh, okay. Gotcha.
I don't know. It was definitely one of those things, classic. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to download it. And then I did. And now I am fine with actively telling people that it's my favorite app.
Everybody's on it now. It was a taboo moment in time where it was like, oh, I don't want to come off as that person.
Right.
Like, I'm not 14, okay?
Yeah.
Like, there was just a bunch of 14-year-olds.
Yep.
I mean, it isn't like every app at the beginning, especially like social media. It's just unless it's like, what was that? Parler? Parler?
Yeah.
Not a lot of 14-year-olds on that one, I don't think.
12 and 10-year-olds maybe.
Yeah.
But anyway, continue on.
Yeah, I think everybody during the pandemic found themselves with a lot more free time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with more free time, we can just spend it all on social media.
There's so many videos on TikTok.
I know, but
it's crazy.
I always say that with Instagram, if I spend a lot of time on it, I come off of it and I don't ever feel great about it. But when I spend time on TikTok, I'm like,
I learned something.
I don't feel bad about that time that I just spent on there because
like
I learned things. Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny. People are clever. I really do learn things from TikTok. It's pretty impressive.
The best part about it is like they actually will tell you when you've been scrolling for too
know.
long. Like how many times
really
have you
sad.
hit that? Hey, you've been.
So sad.
Like, sounds like you.
Slow down. Like,
Hey, maybe take a water break or something.
I got on late. I think it was when I was in Spain, and I got on, and it must have been really late at night or something U.S. time, and I was scrolling for maybe like 2 minutes, and then that popped up.
Really?
It's like, whoa, calm down.
Yeah. Damn.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Maybe the rules in Spain are a lot different.
Oh yeah, you
They're
can only
like-
be on for 5 minutes.
They're doing it
Limiting
right.
social media. I know, that's smart.
Were you on like, or did you use Vine when that was a big thing?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely watched, the most popular ones, but I wasn't on it the way that I'm on TikTok by any means.
Right.
So-
Yeah. I loved Vine, and it was such a bummer when they shut it down.
I know.
And there wasn't really much else to jump to besides that.
No,
I
I'm
mean,
trying
there
to think
was
of
like
the timing of it.
Snapchat. There was like, but there wasn't anything that people were going to be super creative and like with low barrier to entry. Like YouTube, you can do that, but like there's not as much exposure, I think,
Also,
with YouTube.
I think it's the kind of like the entry you're talking about, making a short clip. It's not necessarily easier to make a really good short clip, but it's easier to make a short clip.
Yeah.
Right. And so, especially if something you can just film on your phone, post online, versus YouTube, you have to have this whole little production going on.
Yeah, and it was just like you open the app, you shoot it in the app, and then you post it. With YouTube, I think it's a little different. I think you have, unless you're going like live or something. And back then, that wasn't even a thing. Like YouTube's always like you shoot it, then you export it, then you upload it or something like that. At least that's my understanding.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe
right.
Maybe I'm too old for this shit. I don't know.
Well, yeah, in terms of production, some of the TikTok productions now, I mean, the transitions, it's
Right.
unbelievable to me.
And it's crazy because you'll hear when you hear like the behind the scenes, people talk about like if they're like avid YouTubers or they're avid TikTokers, like that's their full-time job.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're like, I have no life because I'm sitting here editing all day and all night, and that's what I do. I have no social life, even though my whole life revolves around a social app. It's kind of crazy, right?
It
Yeah,
is. It
that's
is really
wild.
crazy.
But I totally agree with you on the part of feeling like you accomplished something after, or almost like not feeling bad about it at least. 'Cause
Yeah.
I also watch that, and I'm not out creating. I mean, I'll watch it and just think, holy crap, there's so many creative people of all ages in the world that you don't expect. I mean,
know.
a 40-year-old dude on TikTok making really cool videos. You're like, I never would have thought that guy would be that, make these kind of videos. So I look at it and I learn for myself how to be more creative, because that's always something I've tried to work on.
Yeah.
Same with, I do that on Instagram too, because I've gotten more into photography with Sarah, my wife. So I'll look at the way people shoot things, looking at things that people did wrong or right, and kind of thinking, oh, that looks really cool. This is what they did. So there's value to it,
Yeah.
I guess, as long as you're not toxic.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Which is why I think I like TikTok more, because I just feel like it's more difficult to do that. I don't know. It just seems like a more...
If you don't scroll through the comments.
Yeah.
That's where all the
sometimes-
toxicity happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I try not to. Although sometimes the top comments are really funny.
Isn't the
So-
best when you're thinking of something, then you hit that the comment button, and then it's the top post
Yep.
of exactly what you're like, I knew it. I'm brilliant.
It's actually very impressive too how well the algorithm discovers what you want to see.
Yep.
Because my TikTok is very different from like Matt's TikTok,
Oh,
for
yeah.
example.
It's crazy. I feel,
Definitely.
I don't know. So it was funny. I have most of my TikToks are just like cat videos because I'm a cat person, which like I know some of you are throwing up in your mouth right now. But when we started the at the Lucky Duck TikTok, and I just like I forgot to switch over the account, so I like was watching a video of like I think it was like a farmer or something. Like I don't know what he was doing. He was like showing some kind of food supply chain thing. And then all of a sudden I'm scrolling and all I'm getting is like I'm on conservative TikTok now. Like, and all I'm getting is like right-wing content.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, I'm not mad, but it's so crazy. Like, cause you see how it all works. It's like, as soon as you start watching something, it's tracking how long you're watching it. If you hit what buttons you're hitting while you're watching it.
Yep.
Like if you like it, you send it, and it'll just start feeding you more and more of that content.
Oh, I know, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's super transparent when you look at it from like a different perspective.
That's why I hate when someone kind of tricks me into watching a video, or it's just something that you think is going to be cool, and then it's anticlimactic. So you're just like, damn it.
And then there's like the person who's commenting on the video. They're like, I'm just commenting on this so I get more of these videos.
So I stay on this
Yeah.
TikTok. Yeah, exactly. It's so nutty. It's,
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you guys, I can't remember the name of the documentary now, but it was talking a lot about this, just social media in general.
Oh, the social dilemma?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, they had such a good metaphor for that of like,
Oh, yeah.
the character coming down and
Well, it's like how fulfilling is it now that like the whole Facebook like whistleblower? I bet the guys at the Social Dilemma were like, "I told you so. I told you so." We were such hipsters with this information.
Yeah.
And now today, Facebook announces that they're changing their company name.
Yeah.
They're keeping the Facebook service, but they're changing. Have you heard about this?
No.
They're changing their. It's kind of like when Google changed their name or made a parent company over it, called Alphabet. That's like who Google is like owned by. Well, Facebook is now going to be parented by a company called Meta, just Meta.
Because of the metaverse.
Yeah, the metaverse.
oh,
Dun, 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 dun.
oh boy.
Do you know about the metaverse?
In what regard? I mean, I know now about
Facebook.
the Facebook metaverse.
Yes. It's like they're like talking about this whole virtual world. It's kind of like you watch Ready Player One.
Yeah. No.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry.
You should
So
watch it.
Sad.
it's
I need
well, it's
new
a better
shows,
book, I
so-
think,
Yeah.
than the movie, but
Okay.
it's basically it's a virtual world where you will own virtual property, virtual things like NFTs.
Oh, okay.
You can hang out, you can have meetings virtually. Like we could do this
Oh my God.
very thing. Like you're in your own home, I'm in my own.
That's
And
crazy.
that's what they want to create essentially.
Wow.
And so they think that's the future. Just like they stated, like just like we thought the future was social media when we created this company.
Yeah.
Like no, you didn't. You stole this from the Zuckies or the what was it, the Winklevi twins.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like now we think the future of technology is in the metaverse.
It's probably true.
Yeah.
Every cartoon or movie or TV show that talks about the future, it's always like you put some goggles on and then you go into the internet and you're
Yeah.
some virtual character.
I don't know. I still get. Have you ever tried VR?
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah,
I mean, just
I get really
insane.
sick. Like I hope technology improves that part.
Put a little patch on
Yeah,
yourself.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
some type of anti-nausea.
I don't know, I might be living in
patch.
the real world while everybody's hanging out and having fun partying in the
That'll be the
metaverse.
millennial thing to do.
Yes, bro, I'll meet you in the metaverse.
I think if you, maybe right now might be a little too early, but if you start building a business that sells things like NFTs or just things like furnishings for virtual apartments or homes or whatever, that's going to be a moneymaker.
Yeah, they're talking about how it's all going to be centered around, or the main currency in the metaverse is cryptocurrency. So I wonder if
Libra,
if
isn't that there?
yeah, Libra. I wonder if if the crypto went up when they announced the name change.
It has gone up a lot,
Yeah.
but there's other reasons too. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's weird.
Well, anyway, so you have a PhD.
I do.
How did you get that? How can I get one of those?
For a
Yeah.
long time.
Did you pay for it?
Yeah.
Go to Florida State. Check.
There you go.
Yeah.
So what is your PhD in?
It is in neuroscience.
Nice.
Yep. So
What
yeah.
did you study?
In grad school, I studied the neuroendocrinology of social behavior. So how hormones impact, circuits in the brain, but also just the underlying neural circuits of social behavior. So, yeah, I studied.
What is social behavior? Talking to each other, or I mean,
It's a lot of things,
yeah, right. So
Yeah.
just anything like eating, talking with other people, communicating with other people,
hanging out in the metaverse with other people.
I mean, that's the other thing too, is it can be species specific. So I actually studied prairie voles. So not sure if you know much about prairie voles, but they are great for studying social behavior because they are socially monogamous. So they will mate with a partner and then maintain that pair bond. So not many mammals do that, but prairie voles do. So they are socially monogamous. They also show biparental care. So both the mom and the dad take care of the offspring, which is also super uncommon.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then they also like to socialize with other prairie voles. So they're really good for studying social behavior because not all voles are social. So there are other types of voles like meadow voles that are very non-social. So, putting them in a cage, you see two prairie voles, they're going to spend all their time like licking and grooming and huddling next to the other one, whereas meadow voles will not. They'll be like totally on the opposite sides of cages. So
and these are like little like a hamster looking
yeah, they're like
animals,
probably like this, palm of your hand.
Yeah.
Not very kind to humans. They don't like being handled. Yeah.
No?
They're a little aggressive towards love each other, don't love humans.
Yeah. Where would you find these in the wild?
So they're like in grasslands typically.
Okay.
So, grasslands around Illinois. There's a few other spots that you can get them too. But yeah, so they're not a super common researched species. So only really labs that are studying social behavior are going to have prairie voles. So they're actually captive bred. So there are a few labs that'll go out and actually, capture some, and then they're brought into the lab and obviously, made sure that they're not like, carrying any diseases or anything, of course. And then there's a bunch of prairie vole labs across the US and they're, kind of actively maintained their own colonies. So at FSU, which is where I studied, we had like our own prairie vole colony there that we would, have prairie voles breeding, and that's where we would have them.
Other labs could use them as well, or was there only just your lab?
Yeah, and because most labs are using rats or mice, obviously other species too, but and in that case they would be like ordering their own animals, and protocols are so maintained that you're really tracking whose lab has what animals, and so it's really just our lab exclusive.
Well, do you think there's a difference between like lab bred prairie voles versus like wild bred?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're constantly, bringing in new voles into the lab to like keep maintaining genetic variation. So that's super helpful because, and I think one of the benefits too of prairie vole research is that, a lot of mice, for example, are bred to have, specific genes missing, or, they're going to be very similar genetically, whereas prairie voles are not. So it's kind of almost like one added layer of trying to bring that translation from animal research to human research to kind of have, I mean, it can be difficult because there's things that come with genetic variation, but it's helpful because, it's still maintaining a lot of that genetic variation. So, I studied voles and specifically more so studied the gut-brain axis with prairie voles.
So you were studying how kombucha affects the...
Yeah, for sure. Giving them their kombuchas.
Yes.
Although I did actually do a probiotic study. So.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yep. So one of the studies that I did for my dissertation was giving a very common probiotic called Lactobacillus reuteri, or reuteri, depending on who you ask. And I would go in every day and put the probiotics in the drinking water and then see how it affected their behavior in the brain. So that was an adventure.
Is that probiotic, was that something you would find in a common probiotic thing in the store? Yeah, so Lactobacillus reuteri is super common. So, I mean, you could probably go to the grocery store right now and find multiple things with Lactobacillus reuteri in it, which is kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to look at it. And also it's been studied in, a bunch of different models, but also in rats and mice. And there's been some really cool stuff
showing that it can actually restore social deficits. And so that was kind of how I started thinking about it in terms of prairie vole research is, okay, well, what happens when we use, give probiotics in an actual social animal model? And also, instead of reversing a social deficit, how could it just affect natural social behaviors, which, again, prairie voles are perfect for because they already show them. So
what did you discover?
Asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend, yeah. So that one... So I kind of had two pieces of the dissertation, two major pieces, one of which was kind of manipulating from the bottom up, so manipulating the gut through probiotics, so changing the bacteria that are in there, how does that change social behavior, and then the second project being the opposite. So if we manipulate social behavior through social isolation, does it also change things? And big takeaway is it does. So it's kind of interesting because, like I said, a lot of the research on Lactobacillus reuteri is very pro-social, and it's been shown to enhance oxytocin. But in my studies, it actually did the opposite. So we showed that compared to this heat-killed version of the probiotic, which is just basically them ingesting the probiotic bacteria that's killed. So it's just the components, essentially, of the bacteria. The ones that got the live probiotic actually showed lower levels of social behavior. So my thought there is just, okay, maybe even though lactobacillus is naturally present in the vole gut, maybe I'm boosting something that doesn't necessarily need to be boosted in the prairie vole gut. Right. So, in that way, it could be shifting the population, because it wasn't just reuteri that was increasing. We also analyzed the microbiome and showed that there were a bunch of bacteria that were changing after the probiotics. So maybe it is actually changing the whole population, which we know is important. It's not just one player.
Okay, yeah. So if everybody's gut was, the makeup of the gut was the same, maybe they would not have this weird social interaction that you were witnessing?
Or more so, like, a lot of the previous studies, they would manipulate something in some capacity. So let's say, for example, one study, they look at, giving a high-fat diet. How does that change the social behavior in a mom? And then looking at the social behavior in offspring. So if that's the case, the offspring that have this social deficit have lower levels of a bacteria. So let's say Lactobacillus reuteri. Then if you actually give it back, then you see that reversal of the behavior. Whereas in my study, it was more so, there was no deficit. I was just giving the probiotic to...
excess.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, again, this is all speculation, and there's very little done in terms of the microbiome in prairie voles. So it was kind of like step one, figure out what the microbiome looks like. Step two, start this process in prairie voles. But there's so much more that needs to be done to figure out like what it is exactly that's causing these changes in the behavior. But what's really cool is that also, some of the other sides of this, which is like social isolation, has been really well studied in prairie voles because, again, they're a great model for social behavior. And so that was kind of really exciting to me to see how the gut and also the immune system could also be like adding to those same things, or the circuits that are being changed in voles. So not just looking at the brain, but also looking at, what's happening in the microbiome. And we do see that isolation in voles does change the microbiome. So yeah, it's really cool.
So is somebody taking this and continuing it? Because you're doing something else now?
Yeah. So that was all grad school work.
Right.
And then I decided I wanted to make the jump to human research, which is
nice.
It's whole, very different field.
Can you do the whole isolated thing still?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, a lot of my projects now are focused on the pandemic and COVID. So it's kind of weirdly looking at a lot of the things that I looked at, because we've all been quite socially isolated for the last year and a half. I mean, obviously things are starting to go back to normal, but it's almost like a massive social experiment for the last year and a half. So
did you start doing that before? I can't. I'm trying to remember when you first moved out to Denver. When was that?
Yeah, so I finished my dissertation and moved to Denver all within 2020. So quite a year.
Yeah.
I moved here in August of 2020. So very much in the thick of the pandemic, and the first pretty much whole year of my postdoc has been in the pandemic. So
yeah. That's got to be crazy. Yeah. Myles and I have talked a lot on the podcast actually about our sympathy to like kids specifically, like growing up, going to school during the I mean, it was early in the pandemic when everybody was still at home, and we were like, I don't know how long we expect to keep this up with kids not going to school or being isolated, doing Zoom schooling, and how that's going to affect, you know, their psyche or their social interactions. Like I was a very anxious kid growing up, and I imagine if the boogeyman came to visit the world and everybody was told to go home, I'd be fucking scarred.
Oh, I know. It's crazy to think about.
You know?
Even that, and then, of course, the fear, your parents have a fear of something, which is, I think, hard on a kid. And then you're told not to see your friends. Or if you're seeing your friends, kind of stay away from them, or when you're in public, you shouldn't be around people, which is the most antisocial thing you can do. It's like, just don't go see other people.
It is really fascinating to think too about the different impacts on different ages, because, you know, being 1 or 2 where you're not really cognitively aware of a ton of what's going on versus, you know, 3 and 4 where you're really just starting to get to that level, and then, you know, versus every single age point, I think, would have a different impact on what that could potentially do, just because, you know.
Damn. It's a good thing we brought a scientist on.
Yeah, no.
I mean, I haven't studied that for sure, but I'm just speculating that it would be different.
Yeah, lots. Almost everything we do on this podcast is pure speculation. Is it? I'm wondering if it's true. I've heard that if you don't give babies enough attention, like they can die, or like. So the first time I had heard that before, and then for years I didn't even think about it anymore. And then I watched the movie Old. Have you heard or seen the movie Old?
I don't know.
So it's basically a movie. Spoiler alert! It's a graphic novel turned into a movie, and it's about this experiment where these tourists get vanned or transported over to this beach, and they can't leave the beach. And I think it's like every hour they spend on the beach is like 5 years in real life. And so they all progressively get older, and you can visually see it. It's kind of interesting concept. But the 2 little kids end up growing up to be teenagers. They have sex. She gets pregnant within a matter of like minutes, and like gives the baby. And they left the baby like, I guess like in a blanket for a minute, and ends up dying because I guess they're like, oh, if you don't give baby enough attention, then it'll die or something. And we didn't give it attention for like 1 minute, and it ends up passing. So I didn't know if that was actually like legit. I'm not expecting you to know, but
yeah, definitely not my my realm of research. But I can tell you that social isolation is very impactful in a negative way.
Yeah.
And both actually so along with those 2, my last dissertation chapter was on looking at kind of some of the similar things that I looked at with the isolation study, but looking at post-weaning isolation, which, so, you know, after 21 days, the pups are weaned from their mom and dad, and then they're placed in their own cage. And so at that time, we place them in a cage either with, you know, same sex. So females with females, males with males, because they're super social. So they don't want to be, it's not good for them to be isolated. So one of my last studies was looking at isolation in development. So at that weaning stage, instead of, you know, having some go co-housed, having some be isolated for 6 weeks, how does that differ in terms of what the effects are from developmental isolation versus isolation in adulthood? And it does have detrimental effects, but in a different way, which I think is... So I looked at for example, one of the things that I looked at in both studies were the impact on microglia in the brain, which are the resident immune cells of your brain, which I'm sure once you have Dr. Michael Butler on, he will talk all about. So I'm not going to steal his thunder.
Yeah.
But yeah, so resident immune cells of the brain. So one of the ways that, again, something that's not really commonly looked at in perinatal, so it's kind of just the first initial pass of they're constantly surveying your brain. So one of the ways that you can look at potential immune mechanisms, or at least start to look at them, is how many microglia are actually in a specific part of the brain, or microgliosis. So I looked at how the brains of those animals that were isolated compared to the ones that were co-housed, so the control animals. And you see that the microglia are, increased or decreased in different parts of the brain that we know are important for social behavior, compared to the control animals. But that's different in terms of the pattern, both across males and females, but also across, the adult animals versus the developmental isolation animals. So super fascinating to me personally. I think immune mechanisms in general and inflammation is such a fascinating, ever-growing area of research, especially for mental health too. So it's super cool.
Inflammation. That's a word I hear all the time now.
Yeah.
Inflammation.
I guess a lot of things can influence that, right? Like social, nutrition.
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah, which is kind of what, if I had to give a big overarching spiel of what I'm generally interested is in the fact that, we have these systems in our body, whether it's the gut microbiome and, physiological systems that are all doing different things, but we have so many factors in our environment that can alter those same pathways. So whether it's diet or social support or social isolation, exercise, what we're eating, everything is just influencing those pathways. So how can we use those pathways and almost look at all of those different tools as like tools in the toolbox that we could use to manipulate those same pathways to influence the brain and mental health.
So you could create pills, and then we can take pills, and then we never have to exercise, and we can eat bad and don't have to socialize.
I mean, can't predict the future. But I think it's different for everyone, right? For one person, it might really be exercise is the best method, or diet, or, which is kind of exciting to me. Like it doesn't have to be one thing that's going to be the cure-all. It really can be different things, and we can kind of use them complementary to, things like therapy and whatnot to really impact mental health, which is kind of why I really chose to do the postdoc that I'm doing now, is because I was really interested in more of that applicational, translational aspect of the research.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like if it becomes more and more studied, if you'd be able to tell based on your genetics whether you should have focus more on your diet or this to really kind of mitigate that.
Yeah,
you think that might be?
I think genetics are interesting because it brings up the whole nature versus nurture, and I, of course, both matter. But I think genetics, it depends on what you're looking at too. Like genetics have a lot of influence in some things, in terms of heritability of diseases or impact on certain things, and then other ways it doesn't. But then there's also epigenetics, which is, the environmental influences on how those genes are actually expressed, which I think is super fascinating. So it's not only just the genes that matter, but it really is the environment. So something that I'm super interested in is like more of the movement towards personalized, medicine in general. So even with the microbiome, everyone is so vastly different. So it's really kind of difficult to study sometimes because yes, there's these overarching themes that come out, and it's not saying that we don't find anything with the gut microbiome, but at the same time, what works for you might not work for me. So how do you figure that out, even in terms of what happens in your body when you eat an apple versus what happens in my body when I eat an apple might be totally different, based on a variety of factors. So, machine learning is exploding this area because,
Really?
yeah, you know, you can think about having something that can learn to see how you respond to different treatments or different diets, and, you know.
That's really cool.
Isn't that subjective, though?
Well, right now, the way I feel like doctors find out those things when they're trying to treat something about you is they're like, first try this medicine for 6 months, and if nothing changes or something gets worse, then stop taking it, and then we'll try this other medicine, or we'll try this operation or whatever it is. That's what happens.
Trial and error.
Yeah. There's no like, let's try to predict based on who you are, what kind, you know, what activities you do on a normal basis, how much you drink, smoke, whatever, these type of things. I mean, sure, there's some medicines you can't take, but that's really interesting. I've never thought about using machine learning for that. I guess totally makes sense.
But the data input is only as good as like what I'm willing to say, or like if you say, hey Chase, how did you react when you ate that apple? And I go, I don't know, I'm good, I think.
Well, that brings up something totally separate, but also very interesting to me that I'm very much working on now too. And again, just going to say this now before I forget that all of the things that I'm saying right now are my own opinions.
Yes. Right.
But yeah, it's what's fascinating to me also is that there's this subjective experience that we have, right? Of like, oh, I'm feeling this way, or I feel that way. But then there's also these objective markers of, you know, in our bodies of, let's say, you know, whether that's an inflammatory marker, for example. So CRP, C-reactive protein, is one that's commonly measured in blood work.
Okay.
It's a really pretty well indicator of inflammation after a certain level. So there's a lot of interesting studies that are coming out that say, okay, you know, let's say there's this treatment that works to lower inflammation. If you look at this subcategory of people who have depression, for example, who also have this certain level of CRP, it works really well, but for others it doesn't. So, you know, thinking about these subcategories based off of objective biomarkers, but that doesn't necessarily match up to how you're feeling. So then it brings up this larger question of, you know, how do we think about these things? And, you know, connecting the two are super important, but also like, if you're saying you're feeling a certain way over time, can that be more important? So
yeah, it's because like my pain tolerance or my understanding, my scale of 1 to 10 for like pain, for instance, is going to be different, you know, than Miles's or yours. So it's like there's variability, right?
There's that, and you feel different every day, and it's hard to remember how you felt last week or a month ago. So when the doctor,
you're probably not very good, like not you specifically, but in general, we're not very good at remembering those kinds of things.
So if the doctor says, "Is it getting better?" You're like, probably. I don't know.
Maybe
since yesterday.
Yeah, unless you're really told to like focus on it, like pay close attention.
Or write down.
Daily journaling.
Yeah.
And even then, it's like still very subjective. You know?
I mean, you're getting a snapshot in time, right? But it's like, of course, it's just incremental steps of combination of study after study that try and get at all of these different pieces. But yeah, I think in terms of, you know, what I'm very fascinated by is that sense of, okay, how could we use something like machine learning to, let's say, you know, I don't know if it's that you have microbiome samples that your doctor has, and, you know, you have the blood work that you're getting from the doctor too. So that combined with your microbiome sample, combined with surveys that you're taking subjectively to measure those kinds of things over time, you know, can a system start predicting how you, based off of your microbiome and physiological markers and subjective ratings, are best going to be fit, you know, in terms of what you're doing with your day-to-day. And there's some cool systems that do that already.
Really?
Well, not in that specific regard, but,
okay.
you know, I don't remember the name of it, but there was some watch app that someone just told me about, or like a wrist app that you can go in and input all of your, it's not like biomarkers, it's not any blood work or anything like that, but it's all about performance. And you go in and you log how you're sleeping, how much alcohol you're drinking, how you're eating, you know, all these different factors, and it's trying to optimize your performance and recovery. I've never tried it, but people who I've talked to seem to really really like it.
Is that what the Apple Health stuff does? Do they do that kind of thing yet?
Yeah,
I don't know if it's that
they
far.
do a lot of stuff. Do you have an Apple Watch?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Oh, I actually I was supposed to get the new one today, but I wasn't home to sign for it. And I was talking to the guy through my Ring app, my Ring doorbell, video doorbell, and I was like, "Can I just tell you it's good and you leave it at the door?" And he's like, "Nah, man, Apple's pretty like, strict on this." I'm like, "Come on." Like
yeah, they do pen that comes out the Ring.
Yeah. That's the part of the metaverse.
Yeah.
And a shoot.
A virtual hand, that kind of.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you measure your microbiome?
So typically you're measuring it through your stool samples.
Yep.
So, yeah, I've handled a lot of vole poop in my day.
Nice.
Yeah, you know that meme that's like, good job pooping. Yeah, that was my life for like 5 years.
So are they little nuggets?
Yes, they're like, very, very small. Yeah, so you do it through stool. I mean, you could, that's only an indirect measure, but that's like the pretty typical method because it's obviously very non-invasive. You can have people do it in the comfort of their own home.
Yeah.
Or in the comfort of the lab if you're a vole. So yeah, it's typically through stool, although, there are studies that can do it by actually getting samples from the actual intestines, but that's much more invasive.
Right. Got to get up in there.
Yeah.
How do you deal with stool now?
I personally am not as much on the wet lab side anymore. I mean,
Is that what it's called, the wet lab?
Yeah.
Wow.
The wet lab more is like, on the bench, working with samples. Wet. Yeah.
Super wet.
Mushy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's
the firm lab, the wet lab,
the dry lab.
Yeah.
I know, it's weird saying it out loud and just not thinking about it.
Speaking it to normies like us. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just one of those terms. But yeah, no, we do microbiome samples in the lab with the projects that I'm working on now.
Okay.
But it's basically they get a kit, you send them home, they have gloves, all the, things to protect themselves.
Oh, that's cool.
And then you put it in a little tube. If you're eligible, I mean, there's a ton of different studies and they all are, mostly related to veterans because I do work at the VA.
Okay. Not a veteran.
Yeah, but not all of them. But a lot of them.
Cool.
So.
Do you have to be a veteran to go to be seen at the VA?
I'm pretty positive. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm in a very niche world of the VA, and it's my almost now going into my second year, so learning a lot. But it's made to care for veterans. So I work in the research department, and it's called the MyRec, and there's a bunch of different MyRecs throughout the U.S., and each one is kind of specialized in a different area of research. So the one that I work at is really specialized in suicide prevention research. So a lot of our studies are focused on suicide prevention. There's a lot of other studies that we do, but a lot of suicide prevention work.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's one thing that I'm not passionate about it, but I'm like, mental health is everything.
Yeah.
And I know it's one of the big issues that globally we face, but in America, it's like not enough attention is paid to it. And I think we're just now getting around to actually giving it its day, so to speak. And I'm also learning a lot recently about the microbiome and how important that is. That's also a very new field. Ish.
Yeah, it's definitely exploded in the last, especially I would say like 10 years. It's probably really taken, especially in terms of becoming very public news, I guess. Yeah, mainstream media. That's the word I was looking for.
So are companies abusing that, or is it legit that we really should pay that much attention to our gut biome? And
I think you should definitely pay attention to your gut microbiome. very big advocate of that. But that's hard. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? Like you can't like test your microbiome.
I was going to say, how does one do that?
I would
You
say
take someone else's stool and you put it inside of you.
don't do
don't
that.
do that.
Do
Okay.
not do
Fecal
that.
transplants?
Yeah.
You're not
South
a
Park
fan?
told me that's what you should do.
Oh my god, that episode of South Park is my favorite. One of my favorite episodes of South Park. Yeah, don't do that on your own.
No.
They can actually be very dangerous. People have actually like died from doing that.
It makes sense.
Yeah, you don't
that
want to
he
do that.
Could die.
I mean, if you think about it, you have
Disgusting.
these microbes inside of you, which is just such a mind-blowing concept, right? Like there's either equal parts or probably more. The 10-to-1 is pretty debunked now, but it's probably like a 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 roughly of microbes compared to like your cells. So like human cells.
I've heard of that. That's spooky.
It's crazy, right?
Makes your
So there's
skin kinda
either
crawl.
equal or most likely more of them than there are you, which makes you kind of think of yourself as like an ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Like you have these live organisms inside of you, not just in your gut, but everywhere. And they're sending signals. They can, make signals that are getting into your bloodstream and into your brain, or either sending signals there that are hitting the nerves that are then going to your brain. A bunch of different ways that they can influence your brain. But, they also want to survive. So it's just kind of a weird thing to think about in the sense of, what you're eating is directly feeding certain types of microbes in your gut.
God, this just blows. If you've never heard about this, it just blows your mind.
Yeah.
It's like you have to feed your parasites.
Yeah, I remember.
Well, I wouldn't call them parasites because
Yeah.
It's a mutualistic.
It's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. Is that what it's called? Mutualism? Yeah.
I remember learning about this in biology, but it was about sharks. Like sharks and the fish that attach to them and eat the whatever off of them. It's that mutual relationship because they help each other. But they never taught us about our gut, maybe because it just wasn't
it's hard to...
well known.
Definitely, I think, less known. And again, we're just finding out so much more now. And even then, it's like... Step one, figure out what it is and how important it is, which I think we've definitely gotten there. Like, we know it's important. We know that these microbes in your gut can influence the brain through multiple ways. And now it's, again, moving to this idea of, okay, how do you think about, again, for example, a probiotic.
Yeah.
What a probiotic does to you versus to me, and what that means versus something maybe like a prebiotic, which is... a probiotic is going to be an actual live bacteria that's been deemed beneficial for human health. So that's an actual live microbe that you're ingesting versus a prebiotic, which is going to be food for, the bacteria in your gut. So what I'm super interested in is this movement towards prebiotics or even symbiotics, which would be kind of like a combination of both.
Okay.
And thinking about, okay, you have this particular microbiome that's definitely changes, and you can change it based off of how you eat and what you're doing and what you're ingesting, but it's relatively somewhat stable. And so by giving those prebiotics, you're just really flourishing certain types of bacteria that are individualized to you per se, or could be, versus giving a probiotic, which would be introducing potentially a whole new species or one that isn't super prevalent in your gut versus my gut. So
is there any dangers to that, you think?
To a probiotic? I don't think you can definitively say. I don't think it's...
It might make you less social.
True.
If you're a prairie vole, maybe, yeah. But what's interesting, too, and I will say the caveat is that when we started, we were basing off of this one study by, just to give credit where credit is due, by Shelby Buffington.
Shout out.
Yeah, Dr. Shelby Buffington. Thank you for really fascinating work because it's drove all of my dissertation work. But yeah, it was really much this. What were we just saying? So,
is it dangerous to?
Yes. Okay. So, in that sense, it was restoring this one thing, right? But they showed that this heat killed control. So, essentially killing this bacteria and just giving them the components, because if you're introducing something, if it's a structure of a bacteria, you still want to, it could have an effect, right? So you want to control for that effect of the structure of the bacteria. So we decided based off of some previous studies, that was going to be our control group. But that's still something, right? So in comparison to that group, we saw this lower level of social behavior. But, in a grand scheme of things, including an extra group where it was just, nothing at all that they were ingesting, it was just water, would be super helpful to look at. So,
Okay.
Jury's still out.
Go ahead.
Yes or no? Eating dirt is good.
Yay.
I don't recommend anyone eats dirt.
Okay.
I
Damn it.
would,
No.
if I had we'll do a hypothetical
Just bought a jar of
scenario.
dirt on eBay.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that are not great for you necessarily.
I just bought stock in dirt. God damn it.
I will say, though, there's a lot of really fascinating work looking at the exposure to environmental bacteria that you could find in dirt that could actually be really important. So, there's a lot of hypotheses around this idea that, over time, we've kind of become this very cleanly, westernized society, and we're kind of losing a lot of those old friends of, that we were exposed to all the time. So there is a lot of work in that area of, being exposed to some of these microbes that could be in the dirt. So hypothetically, let's just say I have a kid and I have a backyard that I know is parasite free. I would actively encourage them to go play outside.
Right.
Because
I was listening to a podcast and they had this farmer on, and he was an older gentleman, and he's like, never been sick a day in my life. He goes, and I drink water from the same trough that my horses drink
Oh
from.
my God.
That's disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, again,
Kind of gross.
you really want to know what microbes you're working with?
So how does one understand their own microbiome makeup?
Yeah, it's tough. At least right now, you know, ideally in the future, I think it would be amazing to see, okay, you go for your regular checkup, you're getting X blood work done and you're getting a microbiome sample done, but we're just not, I don't think most places are not there yet.
Poop on a stick.
And we really don't know what the advice is right now, right? Like it's hard to know because it's still just, there's so many layers of the research that you have to do to figure out, what to tell someone to do. I think there's these larger things that we know are inherently going to help or promote a healthier microbiome per se, because there's things like the American Gut Project where they collected a ton of stool samples from people and they've gotten some really cool stuff out of that. And I love Michael Pollan always says eat real foods, mostly plants, not too much. And I just big things like that where it's fiber, diversity of the plants that you're eating, lessening processed red meats, for example. Like those kinds of bigger things I think are pretty well defined in the literature, but the specifics of like what probiotic you should take versus I should take is just there's so much more to know. But I do think that there's a lot of promising work going into how something like a probiotic could alleviate symptoms for certain subgroups of people for mental health, for example. So that's kind of the stuff that I'm super interested in. And there's been some work done by the people that I work with looking at those kind of same things. So how can we think about some of these complementary pieces, whether through diet or exercise or, even pills in the sense of like an omega or a probiotic that could complement some of the other treatments. For specific people, it could be super beneficial, but there's so much more that we have to do.
What do you think the best way to get probiotics into your system is?
Again, I feel like a little de-emphasized on probiotics and more in the sense of the prebiotic realm. So fiber, I think fiber is super, super important because fiber can't really, with more specifics, but inherently fiber is going to feed the bacteria in your gut. Because there's certain things that we can't break down, but they can. So they're basically, we're giving them food, and then these bacteria can eat, this fiber, and then they break that down into other things, and then those things then go into our bloodstream. So for example, one of the things that like a byproduct of that is short chain fatty acids, and short chain fatty acids can then go through the bloodstream, and they have a lot of impacts on even things like gene expression and going to the brain, for example. So that's kind of a major piece, I think, to me, is like, okay, if you just think about, because most people are not getting enough fiber in their diets. Emphasizing plants are a major source of fiber. So
so when people say you should eat fiber to offset your sugar intake, like your added sugar intake, for instance, that's why when you eat an apple, even though it has a lot of sugar, it's not going to have that same blood sugar level spike and decrease. So is it the bacteria is it only the bacteria that's consuming the fiber, or does our body use it too?
So again, like I said, there's certain types of complex carbs that our bodies can't break down. Again, I'm not a nutritionist, so the specifics of individual things I can't comment on. But in terms of something like an apple, eating an apple with the skin versus juicing the apple, for example,
right?
It really does matter, because I think, I don't know specific biochemical attachment, but the combination of the fiber with the sugar does really matter. Because I think it really does change the way that it's processed in terms of, how it's broken down and where it's going. So, yeah, I mean, fiber and complex carbs specifically are going to be going to your bacteria in your gut. And then they're going to break those down into different things that you then can use in your body. Which evolutionarily, we evolved with these microbes, right? So it has to be some sort of symbiotic relationship, like we were saying.
Yeah.
It's why did we evolve with these? And that's why I think it's so fascinating in relation to social behavior, because, if we evolve to be these social creatures in some ways, like it's just a weird meta thing to think about, right? Of we have these things inside of us that are communicating with us and influencing the way that, these circuits in our brains, and even potentially the things that we're craving. So, I cut out meat a while ago. But there are certain types of, let's just say bacteria that are consuming the byproducts off of certain things that I'm eating. But if I'm no longer eating those things anymore, then I'm theoretically starving off those bacteria. So then it's changing the composition of my microbiome, and then that's changing what signals are getting to my brain, and could potentially be changing the things that I crave. So, it's just fascinating to think about from the perspective of, if you're consuming something regularly, what are you then feeding in your microbiome? And then what are those signals that are being sent to your brain? And then what are those things inherently causing you to think or crave, or,
I never think about it like that. It's always like, how does it affect my cholesterol or my
those
blood
levels? Because we've been told those were what you need to focus on, right? Like historically, which also like kind of spooks me when we talk about like new fields of science that have promising results and studies, and like how long that actually takes to get back to my doctor and for him to be like, yeah, we should take a stool sample and analyze it, because I just read the other day, I'm keeping up with the science, and you need to make sure that you're feeding your microbiome.
If they keep up with the science.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's that, and also it's tough because it really is a culmination of the literature, right? Like one study, even with my studies in prairie voles, it's 1, 2, 3 studies in a cohort of prairie voles, and it's so, that's why it's so important to have such a culminating additive literature to the research. And it's so important that like each one is really adding to the piece of the puzzle, right? Because it's not until you see something repeated and replicated, which doesn't always happen, for you to really be like, okay, this is something that's really worth applying. And even then, the basic science has to get to the translational aspect, which then has to get to, you know, the application. So there's just so many pieces that play off of each other, and it's just such a process. But, you know, science communication is super important, but it would also be tough, I'm sure, to keep up with that as a doctor. And
well, you can just listen to the At the Lucky Duck podcast.
Yeah.
Every 2 weeks.
We have all the greatest tips that are only our opinions.
only our opinions.
Elimination diets are interesting in that way, like cutting out meat or cutting out carbs or cutting out sugar.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think even elimination diets can be a mixed bag sometimes, because it's really hard, even with, you know, mechanistic studies, to pinpoint what exactly something is that's influencing it.
Yeah.
You know, but so it's just tough, and I think carbs get a bad rep.
I do too.
Yeah, I mean, again, carbs is such a vague term, right? Like when people say carbs, it
can be so many things.
It can be so many things,
Yeah.
and you know, again, fiber, huge source, can be complex carbs. So it's not the only place you can get fiber from, but it's a pretty major piece of that. So I have a lot of thoughts.
I always roll my eyes a little bit when they're like, "Oh, I don't eat carbs." I'm like, "Oh, okay, whatever,
No carbs at all.
And again, it's
we're slowly dying."
Even with diets, it's like, are you eating less calories than you were eating before? Is this sustainable? You know, all of these things.
It's all about, I mean, my understanding is it's mostly about caloric intake, right? Is like, well, if you're wanting to lose weight.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're eating less calories, then, I mean, calories in, calories out aspect of, you're going to lose weight. But over time, what's sustainable? And even then, if you're eating less calories over a long period of time, your body's going to start adjusting to that. So then you're just going to lower your metabolic activity, and, you know, that it causes a whole another realm of, our bodies are really good at adapting. It's kind of what we're meant to do. Yeah. So
maybe I'm going to make a hypothesis, and feel free to study this. You can take my idea if you want.
It'll fund my grants.
Yeah, exactly. Popularized on the very popular podcast.
I'll write that in my grant application.
Reference and the Lucky Duck.
Please don't listen to any of the other.
It'll be like the little one citation, you know, and I'll literally APA format.
Thank you. People who are on a ketogenic diet who cut out like carbs, they're just pissing off the microbiome that rely on those types of nutrients or whatever. And that's why everybody on a keto diet is always pissed off all the time.
So that's your hypothesis?
That's my hypothesis. It's sending negative signal. The microbiome is sending communication to your brain that's negative, and it's causing everybody to be fucking grumpy all the time.
You know, a lot of people really love their keto diets, though.
They do. And they'll let you know.
They will let you know. I have interesting thoughts on ketogenic diets.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
I don't study ketogenic diets,
like
so I
what?
can't.
Please do tell.
I mean, again, I cannot steal Dr. Michael Butler's thunder, because his realm is high-fat diet. So you should have this conversation with him for sure. But because of his research, I've learned a lot about the impacts of high-fat diet on the brain. And again, fat is a very generalized term. It depends on what types of fats, you know, saturated versus unsaturated, super important. But we know that, especially with saturated fats, you have this, you know, neuroinflammatory mechanism that typically happens. So I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a nutrition PhD, but I'm not on keto, if that
it does not sound it sounds like a short-term solution if you want to lose like
you're going to lose weight fast, because I mean, ketosis is a real thing,
right?
I mean, you're genuinely going to start using, you know, ketones as a fuel source versus glucose. It's a real biological mechanism. So it's not like there's no science behind it. To me, again, it's just that piece of, and there are people who do keto and get enough fiber, but I don't know if everyone's getting enough fiber. And so what are you losing by switching to fats, and what types of fats? I think that's super important. So somebody who's on a plant-based ketogenic diet versus someone who's not, and someone who's eating completely saturated fats on a ketogenic diet versus someone who's eating a lot of unsaturated fats and a lot of veggies that are low carb. I think that's an interesting, topic of looking at those two groups separately.
So even on a keto diet, you could have a completely different diet.
Yeah. I mean, it's just high fat, low. I don't remember the specific
It's about getting your ketone
definition,
spikes.
You know what I feel like doesn't get enough attention? So fats and carbs, everyone talks about the good ones and the bad ones and what they do, but protein, whenever you look on something, it's just like 15 grams of protein. You're like, what kind of protein? Right? Because there are different kinds of proteins, and some are better than others, right?
I mean, again, you have these macronutrients, right? And so, I mean, I think there's a whole world out there too that talks high versus low protein and what's important and how that changes. Definitely a world out there. But to me, it really does boil down to what's sustainable. We have these macronutrients, evolutionarily speaking, in my opinion, for, why are they there? Why are they parts of these diets? And what components of those things do we need long term? And why is it that our brains are made to run on glucose? Our brains start using ketones as a fuel source when we're starved. So I don't know, it's just a really interesting evolutionarily thought process.
Right.
But there's some really promising research in terms of ketogenic diets for, things like epilepsy or certain types of epilepsy. And I know there's a lot of work going on with looking at ketogenic diets for different types of cancer, tumors, or even mental health. So I'm not saying that for certain subgroups it couldn't be very promising, because I think there could be something there. But it's just not my wheelhouse.
How do you feel about the carnivore diet?
The carnivore diet?
Again,
all meat, no veggies,
disgusting.
no bread, no sugar.
So nasty.
I will respond to that by saying I'm a pescatarian.
Me too. So you just
Love
wake
my
up.
salmon.
You wake up and you eat part of a cow.
You just eat all meat all day. Big slab of
like a
ribeye
steak.
for lunch, sirloin for
breakfast.
I literally can't even.
That's disgusting.
I can't.
dinner. I guess some chicken, probably. I guess that's considered part of the carnivore diet, right?
Yeah. I mean, I also just love carbs, so I cannot imagine.
I know, it sounds hard. It also sounds brutal on the old gut.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know if there's any studies on it, right?
There might be. I'm not familiar with them, but I also don't go looking for them. So they very well could be out there. I try and focus my research or searching for pubs on gut microbiome and mental health.
Yeah. So kombucha, let's just settle it right now. Worth it? Not worth it.
I mean, I love kombucha, so
Do you like the taste of it or the
Hold
idea?
on, she's biased.
I have a conflict of interest, which is that I really think kombucha's yummy.
I mean, it's okay.
I don't like it.
It's okay. I
You-
wouldn't say
I also
it's
love
fucking delicious.
sauerkraut. Fermented foods are great. Great for the gut.
Sauerkraut.
Yeah.
Sauerkraut. Interesting. Okay, so you like sour things. You like sour beers and stuff like that?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
That's the only reason why I think I like to drink kombucha, or I don't find it repulsive, is because I've like grown fond of sour beers.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
But I've also grown fond of sour beers.
Mm-hmm.
But kombucha tastes like vinegar, though.
Yeah, but it has
I mean,
a
it's an
sour
acquired
taste.
taste for sure.
Most of them, you look in the back, just loaded with sugar too, so it kind of masks a lot of that nasty taste.
I have had the sugary ones, and they're not as bad.
Yeah, I'm like, this is a fucking soda. What are you talking about? Like, this is not healthy for me.
It's like 1 ounce of vinegar.
So
and
a lot of people say that you just shit that stuff right out, like it doesn't actually stay in your system. Do you know anything about that?
I mean, again, I'm not in the realm of nutrition.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you specifically like how it's being broken down in your body, but I mean, I know some kombuchas have actual live cultures in them, so those are actually probably reaching your gut.
Yeah.
Maybe, depending on what kind.
Yeah.
There's also,
but it's hard because even even with probiotics, it's hard to know. There's not all probiotics are studied in terms of, having well validated research behind their, whether or not they're actually getting into your gut or not.
Efficacy and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
There's the power of placebo too.
Truth.
If it makes you
Placebo's
feel
a real
better,
thing.
then it's good. It's good.
I had a kombucha today, actually, and it had 16 grams of sugar, which was 30% of my daily sugar intake.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
How much sugar is in different products? It blows my mind.
It
So
does.
we did 1 month. I think it was 1 month where we did no added sugar. I think it was.
It was the
That
worst
was
month of your
so
life.
hard.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad in that it wasn't like my diet made me angry or upset, or I didn't feel better. I didn't really feel it. There was no difference for me. But it was hard finding food. Like I like to eat bagels, and I could not find a single bagel at any store, health food store, nowhere that didn't have added sugar.
That's
guess you
really
just
tough to do.
Same with like jelly. You can't find jelly really without added sugar, and I think it's just how it's made.
Interesting.
It just needs it or something like that.
Maybe there's like preservative like aspect to it that they need to add to it.
Yeah, I feel like jelly is just inherently
So there's
sugary.
There's things that just make it hard. But when we did that, I looked at how much added sugar we get in our diets, and I watched this video of a common breakfast that a kid would eat, or that like I would have eaten. The cereal, maybe some orange juice, maybe something else, right, with a yogurt.
Yeah.
And it is insane how much sugar we get. Crazy.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really just...
It made me a lot more conscious about it when I go to the store and I look at products. And there's choices between this peanut butter and this peanut butter, or this ketchup and this ketchup. I look and try to get the one that doesn't have sweetener included in it.
Yeah.
But it just has less added sugar.
That's also the nasty like villain behind that is like the zero sugar, but then you look and it has like that
like 10 different added products.
Like, why does this
better?
taste so good then? What are you talking about?
I know, and it's like, what are you eating, right? Is it like a raw form of sugar, for example, and is that inherently bad or good? And how much are you eating versus some of these other processed items that are in food? It's really fascinating to me. I think nutrition in general is so fascinating. But
yeah,
if I could go back and get a second PhD, which I would not do, but if I could, and it wasn't such a major dedication of my life, I would get a nutrition PhD for sure.
It's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Worth it for one, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
because now you're a doctor, technically.
I know, which I don't really think about that often. Like I very rarely get to say that I'm a doctor.
Yeah, right.
Or I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people do, but
and then if you did, they'd be like, "Oh, what are you like? Are you like a cardiologist?"
Yes,
that's
I know.
And then you're like, "Oh no."
I get neurosurgeon a lot. I'm like, no, I don't do that.
It's like,
No, I have a PhD. Oh yeah, that kind of doctor.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
it's like the flack that dentists get when they say they're a doctor. Like, you're a dentist though.
I know. I know. I get that all the time, and there are many people in my life who, like extended family and friends, who are just
Really jealous.
they
That's
just
what
think
it
I'm a
is.
neurosurgeon for sure, and
yeah.
I'm like, no,
I don't
could
do
not
surgery.
operate on your brain, and I would never operate on your brain. Not that kind of doctor.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
There's only one type of doctor in the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's one I think of.
So since it's a hot topic, I got to bring it up. You got your third vaccine shot.
I did.
How did that go?
It was not a walk in the park.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating to me in terms of, the fact that some people have no reaction at all.
Yeah.
But then some people have such an intense reaction. So I had a pretty rough reaction for the first one. So I got Pfizer. So this is my third dose of Pfizer. Got my first one, pretty rough. My arm, I literally could not lift my arm after the first one. Had some chills throughout the night because I got the first 2 in the morning. So by the evening, I was feeling quite rough throughout the night.
Yeah.
The second one was the worst by far. Really bad, not as sore of an arm, but like really bad fever, chills, all that stuff. And then the third one, I felt quite rough, but not in the same way. Like my arm was super sore, but I just felt really achy the whole time. So just really fatigued, a little brain fog, and super achy. So
yeah,
that's so weird how different it can be, because Sarah had that same kind of reaction, and then for me it was like, I think after one of them I was kind of tired that day, but other than that I was fine. I mean, maybe they gave me the placebo.
Doubt it.
But,
well, what's interesting is that Matt actually had COVID, which is another crazy thing. So he had COVID, and I was in the same apartment as him, and I just assumed at that point that I already had it, right? So I was like, there's no way I don't have it. I'm gonna get it, and I never got it.
What?
That's crazy. Yeah.
I slept in the same bed, everything. Didn't isolate myself because I just assumed that I had it. And I will say that for the day that he was really feeling sick, I stuck him in the other room and put like an air purifier next to him, or, one of those filters, HEPA filters. So maybe that did it, but I slept in the same bed as him. It was a relatively mild case, but I never got it. And to the point where I was like, okay, maybe I just had an asymptomatic case. But I got my antibodies tested before I got vaccinated, and I had no antibodies. So
I think you're immune to it. That's crazy.
Oh yeah, that's good.
It's crazy.
I think that's happened to people, because Sarah got it, and then I got it from her too. We did the same thing where I was like, as soon as she found out, I was like, put my mask on in the house, and I was like, stay in the bedroom because I'm not sick yet. And then when I got sick, then that turned off. But some people have had the same experience as you, and I think you can have immunity to viruses, natural immunity to viruses, right?
Again, not a virologist. It's hard. I've thought that if
I Am Legend taught me something.
He was immune.
I mean, obviously there are other coronaviruses, right? Like common colds can be coronaviruses, but I just figured that if I probably just had an asymptomatic case where I, had it, but I was actively fighting it. But if that was the case, I assumed I would have antibodies from it.
Yeah.
But then I got vaccinated, and it was a very intense reaction. Yeah. Again, very glad everyone should get vaccinated, but it was. But what's so fascinating too is that with each one of them, after I would say a little over 24, probably like the 30-ish hour range, it was gone immediately. And I felt so much better almost immediately, which is so shocking.
Hey, I wonder what that is, because I had a similar reaction on my second shot. I just felt like shit, and then I woke up the next morning. I was like, oh, back to normal.
It's all done.
I remember that. You actually, because we played some video games, and you actually sounded sick.
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, it means technically it's working, right?
I mean, you're mounting an immune response.
It's making
doing
antibodies
what it's supposed to do.
Fight off the
It means I'm
spike
sickly
protein.
because my body is like,
But so many people are like that, It's not. It really is fascinating. I feel like there should be a study on that, but I don't know how that would.
Did you have any hesitation with this third shot? Just based on some of the decisions from the FDA saying they don't want to authorize it for your age group. Yeah,
for sure. I think, I've been trying to follow the data as closely as I can. And the thing that I was trying to kind of closely follow was obviously, safety profiles of things, but also just one of the major pieces that I have been following throughout the whole thing is this idea of antibodies versus memories in different types of immune cells, and whether or not you have circulating antibodies versus whether or not you have a memory of this response are two different components.
Real quick, if you understand it.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is I'm not an immunologist, but essentially there are different types of cells in your immune system, and they're going to have these memories so that if some type of virus, let's say, comes in again, they're going to remember that and be able to mount an immune response versus circulating antibodies. So it's kind of almost a difference between, in a very generalized way, whether or not you get infected, because as you see, there's these breakthrough cases, right? And so whether or not you get infected and have this mild case versus, and can quickly mount an immune response versus the hospitalizations and like the severe cases you're having. Yeah. And that was kind of one of the things that I am interested in terms of, it's very clear to me, at least from what I've seen in the data, that the vaccines are amazingly effective at preventing hospitalization and death.
Yeah.
And to me, because I work in a, high risk, I work in a hospital. Right. So yeah. I think I still qualify under that realm of umbrella of what they recommend. It just made sense to me.
High exposure, high,
yeah, I mean, if it's circulating in the environment, the more likely you're going to have a breakthrough case.
It reminds me, we went to urgent care earlier this week, and I was like thinking the whole time, opening the doors and stuff, because that's where the COVID patients are going, right? To urgent care, probably if they kind of have a bad case. And I was sitting in the waiting room, and the lady's on the phone, and she's like, "Oh yeah, just stay in the parking lot and we'll get a room ready and we'll just bring you right into the room." I'm like,
yeah, hold on.
That's interesting. Yeah, I feel like so many places are drive-through now. But I mean, even then, it's like if you're vaccinated, you were wearing a mask, like you have very good protection. But,
but I made sure to wash my hands extra good that time when I go.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Do you wear a like regular cloth mask or like an N95 mask when you're
at work?
Yeah.
I wear a surgical mask, so in between. I actually don't know if I'm allowed to wear a cloth mask. I think. Yeah,
I was wondering because I've now heard even just major doctors just say the cloth masks don't work. Like now that's a big, like they were saying, oh, they do work, or maybe they work, or they work maybe they prevent 10% of the viral spread or whatever. And now they're saying, it's not even worth. Interesting. Like it's like either a K95 or up.
But maybe they're talking about if you're wearing the mask, your protection versus protecting other people from it.
Protecting. I mean, I know there's definitely a discrepancy there.
Because like, I can totally understand like the droplets thing. Like it's going to catch a certain amount. Like anything that's in front of me, even my hand in front of my face is gonna catch some. But like the overall efficacy of it,
I'm sure
still
again
unknown,
it's like
maybe. I don't know.
Almost like a thing of a dose response curve, right? Like of different layers of protection. Like you're gonna have higher level layers of protection based off of certain types versus others. But I wouldn't say it's zero, but again, I'm not.
Because I bought a
not into that
big old box of N95s when they went on sale finally to the public, and then like the pandemic went away, and then I was like, fuck. Well, it didn't like go away, but like, you know what I mean? Like over this, in the beginning of the summer, we were all like, it's going away. Fuck yeah. And then Delta came, and then like, we're all like, shit.
And then more people started wearing masks, but it still wasn't required. I went to Spain this past week.
Yeah.
What was that? Last week? Yeah. Week before? Yeah, last week. And I didn't have any more masks in the house because all of the cloth ones just were somewhere, I don't know, dirty. Because I haven't worn one in a while because I work at home, so I don't have to go to work and have to wear one or whatever. And so I'm like, okay, I got to get some masks because they require them indoors. So it's just outdoors you don't have to wear them, but if you're indoors anywhere, it doesn't matter where you're at. And so I went to Walmart and tried to find some and couldn't. I looked in their pharmacy and everything.
Masks?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then I went
to Walmart's like, they don't work.
And then I went to Target, and Target used to, right in the front of the store, have like all the surgical or the kind of fake surgical ones, and then the cloth ones and everything, and I couldn't find them at all. So I went into Target's pharmacy, and they had some stuff on the shelf, so I just picked up a pack of them. But then I went to Spain, and it was weird going in. Like, I was in my hotel, and in your hotel you have to wear them if you go, you know, from down the elevator or something. And so like one day I went down the elevator and I was like, fuck. And I had to go all the way back up to my room, grab my mask, and then go back. And then when I came back to the US, it felt really weird not to put one on going into places.
Because they're like pretty strict over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I forgot a few times, and the staff would be like, hey, put your mask on. Put your mask on. I'm like, I'm sorry.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah, I mean, I wear surgical masks, and
that's the way to go. That's the move. Yeah.
I mean, I think masks in general, they work to different degrees, probably, I'm sure. But
yeah, if you're around people, like I wore a mask for 20 hours this past weekend because that's how long my travel time was. And I was only at the airport, at another airport, at another airport, and then at another airport that entire time, and on the planes. And all that time you have to wear a mask. And so that was the longest time I've ever worn one. But
your beard itchy?
Yes.
So itchy, right?
Yes. It sucks.
Yeah.
You're like, want to put your hand under and scratch it.
I don't have that problem.
Yeah.
I did fall asleep on an airplane recently, and I was wearing a surgical mask and then a cloth mask over that. And I never fall asleep on airplanes ever. And it was a really early morning flight, and I somehow fell asleep, and I like had my mouth open. So I like drooled a little bit in my surgical mouth, and I was like, oh my god, it's the worst.
I bet it smelled so bad.
It was terrible.
It's perfect though, because normally if you do fall asleep, that's what happens is your mouth opens and you look like on the plane, and
but no one can see me.
People coming by and they're like, oh, that guy, right? Or that lady.
You know what's also crazy is that two things that have been interesting in terms of, you know, starting a job or working through the pandemic is, one, being on Zoom with people and then meeting them in real life, both in the sense of their height and also mask versus not mask. So what someone's face looks like below, like, I don't know, I'm just sometimes my brain is not good at predicting.
Catfishing was a whole new, like, on a whole new level during the pandemic, especially when they were required indoors, like in between bites of food or whatever. I was like, I have no idea what you look like.
Seriously.
That's so true.
Roll a dice in the second date.
I totally agree with you, the height thing.
Yeah.
I met someone for the first time last week, and it was crazy. I'm like, dude, you're really tall.
Yeah, or like one of the two.
Short.
It's either really tall or really short, and you're like, I had no idea. No idea. So fascinating.
Yeah, that is interesting. I haven't had that issue, but I could see that being a thing.
Yeah.
I did hear something interesting. Somebody asked on Reddit, the Ask Reddit subreddit. It was, is there such thing as pretty privilege? So what I mean by that is, if you're a handsome or a beautiful person, do you get treated differently than
totally.
other people?
Yeah, I think that's a thing.
Yeah.
I had when I was my first internship in high school, I interned at a morgue, and the lady was like, good people have good-looking people have an advantage in society. And if you look at, for instance, CEOs in companies or leadership teams, so all the C-level people, they're always like 6 foot, whatever, pretty good-looking people. Right?
I don't know. I've met a lot of
maybe now.
Old,
because things are different, but
bald, crusty looking guys.
That's different. Those are just very wealthy people who used to look really good.
Okay, true. Yeah. Slowly went downhill.
But that's totally a thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's a prejudice.
What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, I would say. I mean, that's just totally my opinion, but I think that that's probably right. I think that we probably make very quick judgments about people. I mean, even with there's, studies looking at just names on a resume and what a name can do in terms of how you judge that application. Yeah. So
did you ever see like a a smoking hot prairie vole get treated differently in
Listen, there's some
captivity.
really cute voles.
Really
They're
nice
just
butt.
so cute.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
They're really cute. You should Google a picture of a vole because they're
Ooh.
Yeah, you
super
should
cute to
pull it
observe.
up.
Yeah.
We hired someone during the pandemic, and we never met with him when we just did phone calls. We didn't even do Zoom video conference, and we hired this dude, and we had no idea what he looked like.
Yeah.
That's so weird.
I think that's great
Right?
though. I mean,
Yeah,
I think
that's great.
double-blind
That's how it should be.
applications.
Because then you
Yeah.
have no.
yeah, no preconceived
Predisposed.
notions.
Biases are just completely don't
Oh,
know.
look at this little guy.
Aw.
See, look at them. They're so cute.
He's a little
See, look,
muskrat.
you see
So
the
they-
hearts because they love each other. I mean, that's so
Oh,
anthropomorphic.
those are their babies.
But yeah, those are their babies.
And that's the parents.
Yep, those are the parents.
Wow.
So, like I said, the dad takes care of the offspring with the mom.
So cute.
So this will probably be the dad.
I'm
or is it
guessing
opposite?
because the mom is huddled over the other ones.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
it would be hard to know without
They don't
like
eat
actually
their
looking
young,
at
do
them.
they?
Oh my god, this is so cute.
Sometimes.
So that's another reason why it's important to wean them because, like,
Yeah.
So if you touch
The-
the babies,
not touching them per se, but like you want to make sure at weaning that you're pulling the babies out of the cage because the mom, again, these are breeding colonies, right? So the mom and dad are very quickly about to have more offspring. So
Oh, gotcha.
so for any
They fucking.
sometimes,
They-
I mean, but what's interesting too is that they can show alloparental behavior, which is other voles taking care of pups that are not their own, which is super fascinating too because
Whoa.
that's not their own offspring. So, but they're
Yeah.
still,
Yeah, that's so weird.
it's not all
Do
of
you-
them. Like it's a percentage. They'll either be alloparental or they'll actually be infanticidal. Infanticidal, is that the word?
where they kill them.
Yeah, so they'll either be aggressive or they'll be alloparental.
Isn't that what penguins do? They'll like eat the babies of other
I
penguins.
don't know anything.
I think I
about
saw that in
penguins.
Happy Feet.
Must be
It
true
doesn't
then.
seem like a happy
It must be
story.
true.
Yeah. So for anyone who's listening and not watching, I don't know if you can actually see it from the camera anyway. There's this prairie vole, probably the mom, who's kind of like
Huddled, yeah.
over the little tiny babies, and
Super
then
important.
the father is like nestled into her, kind
Yeah.
of like
Being a
stomach
lazy
area.
bitch, just like humans.
So lots of
You
huddling
son of-
behavior.
He
So when
looks
I would,
drunk. He's watching Sports Center.
He has a little phone down here. You can't see
He's
it.
on TikTok. Did you
this
study?
is my favorite picture. I love this picture.
Oh, because
Look
like,
at them.
he looks like he's mounting her.
Yeah. So
Just saying.
they're
I
just
mean,
they're cuddling.
That doesn't
I mean,
look
well,
like
cuddling
cuddling.
is
That's a
again a
hard
very
core
human
cuddle.
term. But they do like sit next to each other.
Yeah.
Huddling is a more
Okay.
Oh, prairie dogs.
more proper term.
Those
yeah,
are
not
more
prairie
cute.
dogs.
They have a lot of those in Colorado. Have you seen them?
Yeah, but I've heard that they have like diseases.
Yeah, they have. Well, so over by the Dick's Sporting Goods field where the Rapids play, that's the professional soccer team of Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
You should go see a game one day. It's pretty good. There's large fields over in that area, and they had to cancel some some of the parking near that area, near the field, because they had determined that the Black Plague had infiltrated this like colony of prairie dogs,
Wow.
and was spreading rapidly throughout that whole region.
terrible.
Right? It's like the Black Plague.
Oh my god.
What the fuck?
Isn't that crazy that the Black Plague is still a thing? I
Yeah.
thought it just was eradicated, and then
Yeah.
I learned that homeless people can get it, and yeah, but what do we have, immunity or something like, or it
I don't
just
know how
doesn't
that went
spread
away.
easily in humans anymore? But
Because
it's
we
still
don't
a thing.
fucking throw our feces out into the street anymore, and the rats in houses are mitigated.
Yeah, I guess
compared to
that's probably
back
a
in the
huge
day.
thing.
Quick side note: am I allowed to run to the bathroom?
Yes, go for it.
Thank you.
Yes,
Oh no,
It'll
Comes
be
the awkward
so
part.
quick.
we can carry the show. I
have
promise.
faith. I have
Yes,
faith.
go for it. Yeah, the Black Plague still a thing
Yeah, it is.
among the prairie dog community. Not cool though.
No, you have prairie dogs like 500 feet from your house.
I do. Yeah, they're largely considered a nuisance, but they're fucking adorable. Every time I drive by, I slow down to like a slow cruising speed so I can enjoy them just running across the field. And they're like meerkats. Like everybody back in the day on the Animal Planet. Is the Animal Planet still a thing? Do people still watch
Is
that?
it in Meerkat Nation?
Meerkat Manor.
Manor.
Yeah, adorable.
Animal Planet?
They used to give like all kinds of narratives and backstories to all these meerkats and make them like they're like they had their own reality show. Like Buster is he's going to be secluded from the group because
that's right.
Yeah,
because he went and slept with the other prairie dog.
Yeah, he's fucking hustling, and he had a side piece that outed him.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, meerkats. They stand on the mound like meerkats. It's the craziest thing.
Yeah, they look like this. And
they just kind of look, and they go ee, ee, ee. And every time we I don't have a dog, but we dog sat, and we were like walking the dog, and we walked the dog past the prairie dogs, and they'd all sound the alarm. One would go off, and then one like 50 feet away would start yelping.
Really?
It's their own way of communicating to each other. There's a predator nearby.
Have you ever seen that video where they're like doing the voiceovers for animals?
Yeah.
It's like Alan. Maybe it's Steve.
We were just talking about Meerkat Manor. Did you ever watch that show on Animal Planet? It was like they gave this whole reality show to this colony of meerkats, and it was like the strangest thing and just wildly captivating. I was gonna ask you, did you study like any natal development with
like prenatal?
Prenatal. Sorry. With no, and how that microbiome affects that? Because I gotta imagine that has a lot to do with like
there's some really cool work being done. Looking especially at mothers, and especially things like stress in moms and different exposures to the mother, and then looking at offspring development. There's a huge movement there, and there's also this debate of I think for a really long time it was this understanding that until a baby comes out of either the vaginal canal or is C-section, that there's this sterile environment, right? So, and again, this is kind of debated now, but and there could be things that even influence that in terms of like maybe stress or whatnot. But jury's not out on that necessarily. But there is this, communication obviously between mom and the baby and what's being transferred, but then also even in terms of like C-section versus, vaginal delivery can matter in terms of microbial exposure, because if you think about it, the vaginal canal is this certain type of environment. It's only going to house certain types of microbes, versus if you're having a C-section, the first microbial or potentially one of the first major microbial exposures is going to be more of like the doctor is taking out the baby, and it's just a different exposure in general. So there's a lot of work looking at that comparison in terms of like C-section versus vaginal delivery. And
that's crazy.
So the doctor should dip his hands in kombucha when
not
he's
kombucha,
delivering.
but there is actually a lot of like people now, and there's a movement, I don't know if it's a movement necessarily, but like vaginal swabs and then swabbing
that's
the baby
a
is a thing.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
No way.
Yeah.
Huh. That sounds extra. Is that like
it's kind of like eating the placenta?
Like a white person
kind of thing?
I don't know if it's the same as eating the placenta. I mean, there is some like legitimate work on. I don't know if there's legitimate work on the placenta.
Sounds like there should be.
Yeah.
Myles, you want a PhD?
Yeah. No. Should I? Yeah.
Placenta eating.
I don't know. Are you driven to go to grad school for?
How many placentas can you eat before
No, thank you.
That's
sick?
and then my hypothesis is based on nothing but my own thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know if that'll get you super far in grad school.
He might get published, but
by the
Scientific
Lucky
review.
Doctor.
Yeah, we're gonna start our own medical journal.
Yeah, reviewers are pretty rough.
So you published?
I am published.
Nice.
Whoa!
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My probiotic study is not published yet. It's hopefully going to be submitted very soon. But my isolation stuff is published.
Cool.
And I just submitted my developmental isolation stuff. So,
Sweet.
and then I have my first ever published study was actually in the realm not microbiome related. So it was all about social buffering of stress. So this idea that the presence of partners or even friends necessarily, but the presence of social support in general can actually buffer outcomes from stress. So my project was looking at, if, for example, again in prairie voles, if the presence of a pair bonded partner, so this is, prairie voles that have already been pair bonded, they're, have this pair bond for over 2 weeks, so very stable. And then we stress one of the prairie voles out, either alone or with their partner present. How does that change their anxiety-like behavior? And turns out that the presence of a partner during a stressor actually matters. So it actually buffers the typical rise in anxiety-like behavior that we would see from that stress.
Something you just said, so 2 weeks is enough to say that the prairie voles will be together forever?
Together forever is harder to study because we don't study them forever. But it's a very robust bond. And 2 weeks is kind of a well-studied time frame for that robust stability of the pair bond. But they show partner preferences pretty quickly. So, after this 24 hours of mating and cohabitation with a partner, you see this partner preference develop. So they actually test this by, you have this 3-cage paradigm. So you have your test subject vole, and then you loosely tether one vole, which is the one that they pair bonded to or spent the 24 hours mating with, in one cage, and then you have a stranger vole in another. So let's say you have a female. You have the pair bonded male in one cage and then a stranger male in the other one. And then you just measure how much time that prairie vole spends with each vole in the cage. And you see after this 24 hours of mating, this much higher time, like the majority of their time is going to be spent with the one that they pair bonded with in comparison to the other one. So.
Wow. So they don't break up?
They show a partner preference.
Oh, that's
but
the
they're
scientific term.
socially monogamous. So, especially in the wild, I think it's a little harder in laboratory settings, but they can sexually stray. So,
okay.
yeah.
Pieces.
But they usually come back. So,
They always do.
They always come back. Yeah.
Those.
Good old bulls.
Is it usually the males that stray?
I would say so. I mean, especially because I'm sure in the wild it's more of like a taking care of the offspring.
Bastards.
Yeah. If the female
but
does
I don't
it,
know
they
that
just
for
kill
sure.
them.
I don't study in the wild voles. So
I think this might be my PhD.
Yeah.
this, yeah.
Look at it in
Cheater
animal.
voles.
Cheater voles. Do who is more likely to eat the female or the male?
It's so in terms of alloparental behavior. So this is more in the relation of offspring that are not their own. So are they going to spontaneously show this allopaternal or allomaternal behavior? It's actually more likely that the females don't show it. So it's like roughly, I think, 50-50 for females, give or take. Whereas the males are, I think, higher percentage going to show versus not.
And what is the typical lifespan of one of these little guys?
I mean, in the lab, we're adulthood they're reaching is about 90 days of age.
Wow.
And then we're obviously
Gotta cut them open.
using them for research purposes. So
Yeah, do you cut them open?
I mean,
She's like, I do not want to answer that
yeah, I don't want to
question."
answer that. We do all of our research by ethical standards, and it's all approved by very specific protocols that are minimizing pain. And
So it's like you have to rip the head off.
Just
Yeah.
yeah.
I plead the fifth.
I mean, yeah. Again.
Well, you don't work in that field
yeah.
anymore, so.
So
no,
now you
I'm
just
working.
kill humans.
Do not.
I
Yeah.
gotta imagine it must be so much more expensive to study humans than prairie voles. Is that correct?
Again, it just depends on what you're studying.
So if it's veterans who have to get free health care, so they have to do studies anyway. It's
Oh no, they don't have to do. It's all completely voluntary.
they get paid for
consent.
it though, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Again, it depends. So specific to studies. No one is obligated to do anything. It's completely voluntary.
Yeah.
The people who participate are so great. I mean, it's so helpful. Obviously, like you're contributing to the greater good, and it's really important. So
because it's usually people who kind of have an issue and they're like, yeah, I want to contribute to research for that.
It's hard to know what everyone's motives are, but yeah, typically it's, you know, this is the study, this is what we're interested in looking at. Would you be interested in participating? And then they get to
do you give
consent
people
on their own.
Any kind of drugs, or is it all social behavioral stuff?
I'm involved in a bunch of different projects, so I'm not involved in anything that's giving drugs by any means.
Okay.
So I'm more interested in, again, those kind of the tools of the toolbox, right? So how can we look at different things in relation to how it influences, you know, things like inflammation and then ultimately mental health symptoms, and a larger thing, especially just because of maybe it's because I transitioned into the postdoc with COVID, but really interested in, you know, impacts of COVID, both in terms of just the pandemic itself and impacts on things like loneliness. So does loneliness drive different behaviors? And then also, you know, things like, you know, what does COVID necessarily do to these same mechanisms that I'm interested in? And, you know, something that I think is really fascinating that's going to be really needed to be studied is long COVID.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just trying to figure out what it even is and, you know.
Yeah, what is it? Is it like you have a cough for a long time, or it's like something that you feel changed after you had COVID?
Well, I saw there was a study I just saw the other day that they've confirmed like brain damage, like long-term brain damage, right?
I don't know if it's for everyone, so I don't know.
Yeah, just like specific people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what's interesting is that it really is just, I think we don't really know what it is yet. And it's just this persistence of symptoms for longer than a certain amount of time. And even then it doesn't necessarily have to be continuous. It can be relapsing. And one person's symptoms can be so different from another. I think there was something from the WHO. I think there's a podcast that they said that there's been like over 200 reported symptoms. And so it's tough, right? Like it's for some people, even with COVID itself, it can be totally gastrointestinal and all they have is gastrointestinal symptoms. Whereas other people, it's completely, you know, fatigue and breathing problems or loss of smell. And it's
gut microbiome.
I mean, we don't know how that plays a role right now.
Brain fog. A lot of people complain about brain fog.
I mean, even with the booster, that was one thing that I thought about yesterday was even today, I was just kind of feeling the lingering effects of, you know, that brief brain fog. And I was like, this would be so hard to deal with long term.
I think we probably all know plenty of people who got the vaccine just because they were afraid of the long-term symptoms or things that could show up later on.
And I think that's kind of, you know, it's this added piece that I don't know if it's talked about enough of. It's not just the matter of, are you going to have the severe outcome and are you, you know, going to be hospitalized or die from this? It's also this risk of these long-term symptoms. And, you know, there's a ton of people out there who are still struggling with it. And I think it's so important to, you know, both from a research lens and just to keep talking about, like, it's not going away anytime soon. And it's important to, you know, chronic illnesses in general, I think are just, it's really important to study. And
Do you think that like young kids should get vaccinated?
I mean, I'm not here to give advice on.
Yeah.
I'm just following the guidelines.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Do you think like the Delta variant will be like the last big variant?
Or do you think
there's me too.
I hope so.
I know.
I
heard a bunch of people talking about that. Like they think it might be the last nasty.
I mean, it's very highly transmissible.
Yeah.
So immunity, both naturally and vaccinated wise, I'm hoping will go up.
Yeah.
Or not hoping, but like it is going up.
Yeah.
So I hope, because I'm ready to go back to
fucking A.
going to,
Make
major
out with
events.
people at concerts.
Yeah, spit in
Yeah,
people's mouths.
ever since I got married, that's just on the top of my list.
Yeah. Like, dang, I wish I could do that.
I will say that's another thing I did in the pandemic. Got married.
That sounds
That's
tricky.
crazy.
It was not the best.
Yeah.
I mean, all things considered, my wedding was.
Your wedding
I really
video
hit the
came out
sweet
well.
spot. Yeah, thanks to Matt. I know it was really nice. Benefits of having someone you married who can edit videos. It was. I kind of hit a nice sweet spot because it was right at the time when people could get vaccinated. So, but cutting guest lists and it was not fun, and having to revoke invitations to hit a small guest list.
That's
really
tough.
hard.
Like, sorry, we had to cut a few people.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, of course, in the ideal world, I would have had all of those. I mean, my guest list literally would have been twice the size that it was. But
So you already had sent out invitations before?
No, I waited until the very last minute to send them out.
Yeah.
Smart.
And then, a lot of people, it was kind of the notion of we knew they weren't going to come because it was a lot of, it was a destination wedding also. So getting there was going to be a process. But even then, it was just, we had to end up making some significant cuts because we just couldn't risk that many people. I mean, we had a really big venue. It was indoor, outdoor, so the doors were open the whole time. So that was helpful for us. But still, we were like, we can't risk that many people saying yes because we want to protect everybody else. So
Yeah. Funny enough, I went to a wedding in November, same venue as yours.
no way.
Near Helen.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was in November, and it was still kind of like, should we go?
Yeah.
It's like COVID. We still don't. I mean, it was kind of like at that point, I was feeling more comfortable with COVID. Just being a general thing we had to deal with. But after I saw you post those photos, I was like, oh shit,
so funny.
that's a cool place.
It was. I mean, I can't speak highly enough about that venue.
Yeah.
It was just perfect, and we had these cabins behind it, so we had our whole bridal party stay in the cabin. So it's kind of like a camping, like summer camp weekend for all of my closest friends. It was amazing.
Hot American summer style. Yeah.
10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yeah, that's a great little place up there. It was one of the nicer weddings I've ever been to. They had like fireworks in that big open field.
Oh yeah, I know.
I was like, jeez.
I mean, it was just this huge rolling field that they were like, you could do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, like you could play cornhole out there.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do.
But they have a huge space on top of that too, like already outside the venue. So it was great. I mean,
it's a cool spot.
Wish I could relive it. It was a great day.
Small world though.
And no one got COVID, which was
I know, neither.
huge.
The same thing at the wedding we went to too,
Great.
as well. In fact, there was like several moments during this entire pandemic where I put myself at unneeded risk, just for the sake of trying to go back to some kind of normalcy. Like I went to Vegas. When did I go to Vegas? It was like March. Yeah, it was like March of this year. And things were starting to come down. And I remember I was wearing an N95 mask the entire time with like another mask on top of that. And I remember going through the crowd I don't know if you've ever been to Las Vegas, but there's a place downtown called Fremont Street, and they were just packed, like New York Times Square on New Year's Eve packed. And I was like, if I don't get COVID from this, like COVID is not real. Of course it is. I'm not saying somebody's gonna cut that little bit. COVID is not real.
the one piece.
Yeah, canceled.
Like, listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, I feel like I've just kind of dodged a bunch of bullets, I guess. I don't know. I mean, that or just been careful. I've never like put myself in a situation where I wasn't like wearing a mask and where I couldn't be socially distanced.
It is pretty crazy how, again, thinking about this idea of being chronically isolated for so long, and then you go back into these situations and just like that experience is really surreal. And thinking about threat in that way of, you know, something that you would have never deemed a threat before. And now you have to like really think about who you're surrounding yourself with. And then even in those scenarios, I'm really fascinated by this idea too of, you know, how perceived loneliness can change risk-taking behavior. So, you know, if someone's chronically lonely, how that changes their, you know, hypervigilance, for example, and, you know, how they're perceiving threat and what they're willing to do versus not do. And even then, you know, if you're going into a crowd of people who you don't know versus you going to a wedding of people who you know very well, how does that change how you evaluate the situation, and what are you willing to do and what are you not willing to do?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I definitely do feel for, I know I have friends who are, taking this a little too seriously, like won't leave their house type of situation, even as of a couple months ago. I'm just like, at some point you gotta,
it's hard to go back to
risk.
normal. Yeah. It's like, it feels so, I mean, it's just tough. It really is.
I had a lady, Sarah and I were walking in a park, and we were going across a bridge. And so this lady was walking across and we were walking this way, and she yelled at us because we were too close to her. And that scarred me after that.
Wow.
And I feel like now when I'm in the grocery store and stuff, I like will do my best to walk around people.
It's so fascinating too, just like the course of the pandemic of, you know, I mean, I remember when we were all like, I don't know about you guys, but like wiping down groceries, and it was so much about like the surfaces, and now it's like very much turned to this idea of, okay, yeah, we know it's through the air,
airborne,
you know? And so, but then again, like indoor versus outdoor and what the relative risk is, and it's just a lot.
Time will tell on all these things, right? Like as we have more time to study it, and the different variants and the symptoms, and
it's kind of a crazy time to be in research.
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier, and do you think a lot of young people are now turned on to the idea of like taking the career, I guess, choice that you did?
I mean, I hope so. I think the world needs more researchers. You know, and I think there's so many uses of a PhD and learning the skills that you learn through grad school. Like it's more that you learn. I think the big things that I learned in grad school were not just, of course, you're learning content about a very specific area. I mean, even neuroscience, when I say I'm a neuroscientist, it's like there's so many worlds inside neuroscience that it's just such a plethora of information that I can't even begin, like learning and memory and, you know, sleep. And there's just so many different pockets that you can't begin to know all of it. So it's the content, but then also I think troubleshooting is probably the biggest thing that I learned. Troubleshooting, time management, and like how to solve problems. Yeah, I mean, just troubleshooting. In
Science.
General. Yeah. But like, the
so
scientific method, of course, but it's so much just figuring out how to solve problems and how to manage your time effectively. Were just huge skill set takeaways for me. Yeah.
Um,
what about like communication? Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've really always loved communication, and I actually, as I was finishing my dissertation, I thought it would be a really fun idea to teach a full undergrad course at FSU, which also happened to coincide with the pandemic. So not only was I writing my dissertation, but I was teaching, and then had to switch that class to be fully remote halfway through the semester.
What were you teaching?
I was teaching the brain and behavior intro to neuroscience class at Florida State. Yeah. And I really loved it. I loved teaching. I love the communication aspect of it. Like I really love giving talks and, talking about the research in general, but also just teaching the research was really fun to me. Teaching the content really. I think you learn that like through experiences in grad school, but also I think one of the major pieces that helped me throughout my career was also just the office that I was in. I mean, like literally conversations with like Michael and Derek and the grad school office that I had. I mean, that's really where so much of my, bouncing around ideas and really having that space to
So it's a really
talk
important
about fun
thing
things.
for someone going to grad school. It's an important thing to have that relationship with people in your lab or in the university, in the program, who are in other labs.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously mentor relationship is important. But so much of the day to day,
like the peer community. It's got to be huge.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak for other experiences, but that was such a big, I mean, even now, because it's someone like Michael who I can just call up and be like, this is probably the dumbest thing I've ever said in my life, but like, talk me through this. And having someone like that who's going through the same experience as you and who gets it, I think is super important in all realms of life. Even with work, right? Like having people who understand the situation that you're working through. Of course, I can talk to other people in my life about that, but there's a certain level of understanding that no one else has.
Yeah, it also, I think it kind of creates like a synergy, right? Like you kind of prop each other up, challenge each other. Speaking of which, I did have a question from the audience.
Can I guess what it is? I could be totally wrong, but I have a guess of a topic of what it is.
Is this from our Twitter feed?
This is from the tweets tweeted at us at the Lucky Duck. At the Lucky Duck. What is it?
At the Lucky Duck.
At the Lucky Duck. Okay, go ahead.
I'm
guess what
gonna
it
be
is.
sad if I'm wrong.
Okay.
But I'm gonna guess it has to do with free will.
No. Does not, but we can get to that.
Okay.
So the first question, actually I'll skip the first question because it's so silly. But the second question is, why do you love Joe Rogan?
Oh no, I should have known it was gonna be about freaking Joe Rogan.
This is a twist.
Oh my god.
Explain yourself.
All right, let me talk about my issues with Joe Rogan.
So you don't love him. Okay, I think I
don't
understand.
I don't. So here's my thing. I think, and we go back and forth about this all the time. So you have this, what is the largest, most listened to platform in the country? I think when you have a platform that is that large, you have, whether you want to or not, there is a certain responsibility that comes with having that platform.
Yeah.
And when you have certain people on and have discussions about certain things, you have to understand that those discussions are going to be listened to and, heard by literally the most people that listen to podcasts. And so by saying, oh, well, there's these pieces that are good or bad, to me don't matter in that context, because yes, of course there are conversations that I think are good and intellectual, and I'm not saying that the majority of the podcasts coming off of there are bad, but I do think that there's, especially in terms of something that's maybe very relevant in the times, like going to potentially cause someone to choose whether or not to get vaccinated, for instance, by listening to a certain conversation, then you have to understand that that's a responsibility that you hold.
Yeah.
By having that platform.
So would you say your biggest criticism is he doesn't challenge his guests when they do, or that he just gives them a platform in general?
Maybe a little bit of both. I think if you know that you're going in with a very controversial topic, then you better do your due diligence to have people on there that can like very actively refute that conversation. And again, it's really just a specific instance of like the things that are promoted on some of those discussions that I'm just like, this is so wrong. Like there's so much science against certain topics, and I'm not saying some of them aren't good, but to me that brings up this larger question of how do you think about good versus bad conversations in the realm of a podcast that is literally getting to millions of people's ears.
Yeah. Do you listen to him? Do you listen to the Joe Rogan Experience?
I've listened to many, but I don't listen to him anymore because I don't feel like I should listen to someone who's promoting those views that I know, like, I mean, especially in this particular context, right? Of like, it's so important to get the good science out there, especially with like vaccines and what the real science is and what matters. And you know, that can really be make or break. And so, you know, just those kinds of conversations I think are super important right now. And if you have a platform, I'm not saying you can't have a conversation with someone. And I understand that there's many caveats of like, don't listen to me, you know, I'm not an expert in this.
Oh, yeah.
But
right.
To me, that doesn't, it's still happening on a very widely shared platform. So what is the responsibility of, you know, large platforms, either through podcasting or through social media, for example, to make sure that you're doing the due diligence that you're responsible to do for these important conversations?
Yeah, I wish there was some, I wish he had like somebody on with one, like Brett Weinstein or something, and then like somebody who is more like pro-vaccine, so they can like, instead of like just two people talk like echo chambering back and forth, they can actually have like a debate on the show about those important subjects. Because I do agree with you, there's like there is some danger, especially with the vaccine. I'm assuming that's your biggest
I mean, there's
thing about
the
vaccine
it's like,
stuff.
You know, carnivore diet, all those
Oh
things.
yeah, the carnivore diet.
Like, there's other things that are like, okay, that's annoying to me.
Yeah.
But again, yes, it's just now we're getting to this place where no, this is really important. And what is your responsibility as the host of that show?
That's true. If you think about Facebook, Congress hammers on Facebook all the time, right?
Yeah.
Especially like with the January 6th riot stuff. It's like, oh, you guys had a part in this because you let this stuff spread, and then they had the whistleblower thing and whatnot. And I mean, they reach billions of people, but maybe the people who are seeing those things are in the millions, and they could be some of the same audience that Joe Rogan is reaching. So why doesn't he have the same responsibility as someone like Facebook does? He has a huge audience. He has an audience larger than CNN, right?
And I think all the news combined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so personally, I don't think that the government should control that, but I agree with you that you can take the stance and say, well, I don't think he's doing it right, so I'm not going to listen to him.
Yeah, which I'm not saying that he shouldn't like have a pot, you know, it's his right. Cause I'm not saying, you know, I know the argument of like, well, it's, you know, freedom of speech and he can say what he wants, and, you know, it's his podcast and he's telling people not to take him for like word because that, you know, caveat is still there. So what else is he supposed to do? So I understand those aspects of it. I really do. It's just, what is the context? Okay, this context to me is a podcast where people go to consume information. This isn't like his comedy specials, you know, like that's a different context to me.
Yeah,
a comedy
I think
special
it's like
versus this.
When he has comedians on, I do see it like that.
Yeah.
Like I do see it more of like just shit talking. But if he has like a doctor on or somebody like a PhD professional, Kevin Hart, then I'm like, yeah, this seems more of an informational type of podcast. So it kind of like it's very fluid in that kind of way. And I am glad he has some of these dumb fucks on, because then we get to understand like, oh, your ideas are bad. Like without me hearing this person talk.
Yeah.
And I understand like some people are not intelligent enough to make that decision
that goes
for
into the whole
themselves.
like trust the audience to do. And I'm not saying, you know, there shouldn't be a trust in the audience, but how do you tease that apart? And are you giving people the information that they need to tease that apart? And I think you're right. If he had more of that debate of, you know, let's have someone who's extremely credible that can oppose these views in the conversations.
Yeah, right.
maybe I would feel differently about it.
Yeah, and I think that's what's missing with if he's got to know like, oh, you're coming on because you want to talk about this. Mm-hmm. I don't know a lot about this, or maybe I feel like I know a lot about this, but I'm fucking fooling myself. I'm not a doctor, you're a comedian. So maybe I should have somebody on the other side to really get a balanced view. And I think he really fails to do that a lot of the time.
But do you think he's trying? Because at least I had heard one time I think it was on a podcast or something, he brought up, in the past we've had people on here where we probably shouldn't have let them say the things that they said without having a rebuttal or whatever.
Challenging them.
Yeah.
We've had that
And
issue.
he says we've taken the feedback. Yeah. We've taken the feedback and we'll try to do better in the future. He grew so quickly. What is it? It's been like 5 years since he wasn't that big of a podcast. Yeah. I mean, I can't even remember, but it's been in the last couple of years where he really, really grew. And so that's a short period of time to really change your how you do things. Because his thing was like, we're going to have what we're doing. We're going to have a conversation about stuff, and we're not really educated on neuroscience. So we're just going to kind of listen to what you tell us.
Even some of the things that we've talked about, like nutrition and immunology, I'm obviously not an expert on. So yes, again, with that notion of I am all for context and I'm all for nuance and like
plausible deniability.
Yeah, and like just of course there are like good conversations that I think he's had some really fascinating conversations, but then it's this balance again of like, what am I supporting, and am I then supporting the whole thing by, listening just because, like, how many times does it take him being like, oh well, yeah, that one conversation, yeah, you probably should have, So for me, it's just, I can't see past, especially now with all of this in very, very critical time frame of the pandemic. Those conversations have really just kind of pushed me over the edge of like, okay, no, I'm done.
Yeah, I think his main problem is he's so ingrained in the whole like diet and exercise will prevail. That and that's like
there's a lot of people
his
like
whole
this.
life pretty much.
It's like
that anything that comes to like fly in the face of that, he's like, hold up. Like, let me give you my opinion on it. And it's like, okay, well, you may know a lot about kettlebells, but you don't know a lot about science.
And
so maybe
as
shut
like
the fuck
a
up.
second example, one podcast that I really enjoy listening to, and of course every podcast, like no podcast is perfect, but I love Dak Shepard's Expert on Expert podcast. And I think one of the things that I really like about what he does as a podcast host is that he's super self-aware. And he's very, aware of both bringing conversations to light, which I think he's really good at. It's just in terms of being, very openly vulnerable about some of his own struggles, but also just, being a little bit more in that self-awareness zone.
Yeah.
And again, there are some things that as you listen, I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't really love that.
Nothing's going to be like perfect.
Yeah.
And there's definitely more often, more recently, where I just roll my eyes hardcore at what's being said.
I mean, I'm sure something I've said on this podcast will make someone roll their eyes. Again, trying to be, I'm sure, self-awareness,
Yeah, everybody has their own views and whatever. But what other podcasts do you listen to on a daily basis or a regular basis, rather?
Yeah, I used to, speaking of wet lab, when I was in the wet lab in grad school, I had one of the good, like, best parts that I really enjoyed was, or really grew to enjoy, was the fact that a lot of the bench work I was doing, I could just kind of put in a podcast or an audiobook and really just, zone out a little bit because it's kind of like monotonous tasks, which is less the case now.
Right.
Being in the, like, trying to learn a lot of the human research techniques that I'm learning, it's just a lot more like reading and writing and hands-on stuff, which is fine, but I just have less time and I'm not really commuting anymore. So less time for podcasts, but when I do listen to podcasts, like I said, I really like Experts on Expert, some more of less of the celebrity ones that he does, but more of the, like, researchers and stuff. I think he has some really good podcasts on that. I listen to Tim Ferriss a decent amount. I really like Tim Ferriss's podcasts.
Yeah, he's a good one.
I really have started to like the Huberman podcasts.
Andrew
Huberman show. Yeah, he's a phenomenal neuroscientist. Yes.
At Stanford?
Yeah.
Yep.
And his podcasts are so good. I mean, might be very niche.
He's also a stunningly handsome dude. Talk about pretty privilege, right?
I mean, he's had quite an interesting history, though. I don't know if you've listened to, I can't remember which podcast it was, but he talks a lot about, maybe it was him on a different show, actually. But he kind of goes into his past, and he has quite the past. So, really like his podcast. There's one called STEM Talk that I listen to, but that's pretty sciencey. Rhonda Patrick's podcast. Listen to that one a lot. Really sciencey.
Science.
Yeah.
Nice.
Science stuff.
I feel like there's one I'm forgetting, but I like Tim Ferriss a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like he does a good job of, like, he's a really good interviewer. Like, he asks really fascinating questions to me. And he really does his homework in terms of, you know, not asking the classic things.
Yeah, I feel like his podcast is more produced in that way, where he like really knows what he's going to talk about, what he's going to ask.
Yeah.
Does his background and for like research on whoever he's interviewing. That's cool. One last thing before we let you go.
Yeah.
Did you get a Epic Pass?
I did get an Epic Pass.
Yeah?
Oh, right on.
Epic or Icon?
Epic.
Did you get the Epic, the
Nice.
full Epic Pass or the Keystone?
Oh, I got the full.
Full? Nice.
I got the full. So last year we
Keystoners.
did Loveland.
Yeah.
Only because we were just learning how to snowboard. Do you snowboard or ski?
Snowboard.
Nice.
Yes.
Snowboard? Hell yeah. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
yeah,
Loveland
so
is
then-
okay for snowboarding. It's okay.
I mean, it's fine.
It does the trick. I mean, it's better than like any East Coast.
It's better than East Coast. It's also the closest.
It's close. It's like 50 minutes. Yeah.
If you don't have to go through the tunnel or take
I
the
know.
pass,
Yeah.
it's so much better.
It's so much better. And I don't know how familiar you are with Loveland, but for the first part of the season, we were only going to like the further section, like right before you go up the pass.
Yep.
And that section sucks for snowboarding because
Yeah.
it's like down and then flat and then down
Yep.
and then flat.
Lots of catwalks.
Yes.
Which like it sucks if you don't have enough momentum. You just
Yeah,
kind of get
you're-
stuck and you're like
You're just like
shuttling yourself.
the whole time.
Then you like eventually you're just like fuck it and you like doing
Yep.
these like
Yep.
skateboard.
So true. And then we finally went to the other side because we always thought that those were like much harder slopes.
Yeah.
But there's so many fun ones on that side. So that was nice. But I feel like, so we took a lesson and then we attempted to snowboard at Loveland a few times. And then we went to Breck one time last season, and that's where it like really clicked.
You definitely clicked. Yeah.
We went, I think it was your first snowboarding too, like 4 years ago or 5 years ago or something. And we went to Breck. And I remember we were doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I went again at Loveland for the first time. I also did a lesson, and I was like, this is so much harder than I remember.
Yeah.
I think their terrain is just really good.
The terrain at Loveland isn't really meant for beginners, if you ask me, because of those reasons that you kind of like. If you're not gonna have a lot of momentum going down because you're like trying to balance yourself and you're falling and
Same with A Basin. That's a really bad
Oh, I've
beginner.
heard that one's terrible.
Yeah.
Just
If
in
you're
general for
expert
snowboarders,
or not
too.
expert but good, I think it's really good.
I've also heard that about Vail. I've heard Vail's very ski heavy and not snowboard heavy.
yeah, I don't know. Keystone's my favorite, especially for beginners. It just has like that 3 mile long.
Yeah. Is
Green.
Keystone on Epic?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I
Yeah.
thought it was on Icon.
No, Icon's like Winter Park and
Copper.
Copper. Yeah, so
Copper's pretty good too.
yeah, I've never been to Copper.
I've heard good things, but I've also heard my mission this year is to go to Beaver Creek because I've heard that Beaver Creek in the afternoons when you come down the slopes have fresh warm cookies waiting for you.
Oh snap! That
At
sounds
the bottom
great.
of the slopes. It's very bougie. I don't know if you've been to Beaver Creek, but
No.
it is absurd.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I mean it's very like
Go for that.
expensive, classic ski town.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
take a cookie on the way home.
That's
Pretty good.
you can't beat
Cookie
that.
and a beer would be good.
Yeah, cookie and a beer.
Oh man.
Well, hey, thanks for being on. Really appreciate it. It was fascinating to hear what you study and all the knowledge that you have surrounding that. And yeah, let's make this a regular thing.
Yeah.
Because I want to hear what's new in the science world of microbiome and all that good stuff.
I know. I feel like I really went in on the Prairie Bowl stuff. So,
yep.
Check in on the actual human research stuff next
Hell
time.
yeah.
Yes, please.
Perfect.
On the applicational side of things.
Love it. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. And thanks for watching. For those of you on YouTube, check us out on all the social media. Miles, where are we at?
All of them.
All of them. You heard them. At the Lucky Duck.
At the Lucky Duck. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Patreon, OnlyFans, and all the other ones you haven't heard of. Not MySpace, though.
Boom. Season 2, baby. Let's go. Woo. Awesome. All right, guys. Adios. See ya.